We were celebrating Easter at my parents' house. Daniel, my husband, had gone up to the attic to help with some cleaning. I was downstairs when he came down looking pale. He whispered to me not to react and to wait until my mom was gone. I didn't understand at first, but I trusted him. 3 days later, my parents were in a panic, calling their lawyer. It was strange how the world can change in a heartbeat, and there's no soundtrack, no dramatic music to signal the shift. Just silence and dust, like nothing had happened at all. The attic was filled with old boxes labeled as Christmas stuff. My mom was probably humming to some Michael Bublé song, unaware of what lay beneath her feet. Years of silence, unspoken tensions, and hidden things that no one wanted to acknowledge. My dad always talked about clearing it out, but it was just talk. Daniel, being who he is, offered to help. That's just his nature. He shows up, especially when others would rather turn a blind eye. I was there, sorting through a bin of tangled extension cords, while my mom was in the corner muttering about mice and sorting through garlands. Daniel had moved to the other side of the attic, quietly, as he often does, making himself useful. It was then that I noticed something was off. Everything felt still. Daniel wasn't moving. I glanced over and saw him crouched behind a pile of boxes, eyes fixed on something, not blinking, not breathing. I called his name. He shifted just slightly to meet my gaze. His face was drained of color. He came over to me, knelt down, and told me not to react, to wait until my mom was gone. That's when it hit me. This was serious. Not just a feeling of unease, but something that made my body forget how to move. He didn't ask me to come look or whisper that I needed to see whatever it was he had found. He just said not to react. My chest tightened, like my heart had taken a sharp breath and wouldn't let it go. I asked him what it was, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced at my mom, who had switched to humming Mariah Carey, which somehow made everything feel even worse. She was just a few feet away, carefully wrapping old figurines in bubble wrap like they were fragile antiques, oblivious to the buried secrets around her. Daniel insisted we needed her gone. On autopilot, I stood and walked to the top of the stairs, calling down to my mom, asking if she could check if we still had a vacuum with a hose. She responded cheerfully and headed downstairs, unaware that this was the start of everything unraveling. Once she was out of sight, Daniel got up and pointed. There was a gap behind the insulation, almost invisible, like a crease in the wall someone had tried to hide. Boxes had been shoved in front of it, and a rolled-up carpet tossed over like a cover for something bruised and concealed. Daniel didn't touch it, he just stepped aside. I moved the boxes with hands that didn't feel like mine. There was a cardboard box shoved in sideways, not fancy, just taped shut, the flaps a bit loose like it had been opened recently and closed in a hurry. I pulled it out and lifted the lid. Inside was a folder, cream-colored, slightly creased, neat and tidy. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it, much heavier than it should have been. My fingers were sweating as I flipped it over. My full name was printed on the front. Daniel said nothing, but he didn't need to. I looked at his face, tight and unreadable. I remember the moment it all changed. We were in the attic, Daniel and I, surrounded by the dust and memories of my childhood home. He had already seen it, that much I was sure of. He must have opened it just enough to get the gist, just enough to know that I needed to see it too. My eyes locked onto the date beneath my name, and everything stopped. 19 years ago. That number alone was like a cold splash of water. I opened the folder, but only slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of the header. It was formatted like a legal document, official and intimidating. Daniel leaned in close and gently tapped a section with his finger. I read one sentence, maybe even less than that, before I couldn't go any further. My body stayed still, but it felt like my mind had recoiled. The atmosphere in the attic shifted, not in a physical sense, but emotionally. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, illuminating a part of my life I didn't even know existed. My ears began to ring, yet I could still vaguely hear Michael Bublé's music playing downstairs, my mom laughing at her own joke, and my dad probably pretending not to hear a thing. Eventually, I found myself whispering to Daniel, "We need to leave. Please, now." He simply nodded. We folded the folder, tucking it inside my coat as if it had always belonged there, and descended the stairs in silence. My mom was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, vacuum in hand, asking something about the upholstery attachment. "Something came up," I mumbled. "You're leaving already," she replied, blinking in confusion as if not comprehending that this day was anything but ordinary. We assured her we'd come back later. Dad didn't even glance up from his crossword. We exchanged goodbyes like everything was perfectly normal. Daniel smiled, maintaining the facade. My mom, as always, reminded me to take some leftovers. I didn't catch what she said after that. We made our way to the car, climbed in, and closed the doors. Silence enveloped us. Daniel didn't press for details, and I didn't offer any. The folder pressed into my side as if it had become an extension of me. Something had shifted, though whether it had come undone or finally slotted into place, I couldn't yet tell. The only certainty was that this was far from over, not even close. Growing up, I used to think that being the younger sibling meant being a background character in your own life, forever reacting to someone else's story. But as I got older, I realized the spotlight doesn't just naturally find everyone. My sister Natalie, born 4 years before me, seemed infinitely wiser. From as far back as I can remember, she was the standard by which I was measured. Natalie excelled in math. I was more creative. Natalie earned straight A's. I was praised for having a good attitude. Natalie won trophies. I received participation ribbons and a gentle reminder to smile for the photo. This wasn't cruelty, just a subtle comparison my parents, especially my mom, made without seeming to. They remarked on our differences as if merely observing the weather. And so, like the observant little sponge I was, I learned not to ask for too much attention or space. Natalie's life progressed like a success story you'd read in a lifestyle blog, the kind that makes you roll your eyes at how perfect it all seems. She secured a scholarship to a prestigious business program, the kind with a name that's difficult to pronounce and sounds more expensive than it should be. There was a picture of her holding a certificate, her name on it, with our mom beside her, beaming as if she had personally handed Natalie her future. After graduation, Natalie launched her own company, a wellness and productivity coaching business, mindfulness journaling, digital planners, clean fonts, curated lighting. It was all part of her brand. Her business had vision statements and Instagram testimonials before it even had a physical office. It took off instantly. She attracted grants, clients, interviews, and the kind of success that led people to say she was a natural, that some people are just meant for this. But with her success came an impossible arrogance, the sort that people overlook if you're photogenic and charismatic. She would cut people off mid-sentence, correct them casually, and speak about energy alignment as if the rest of us were just... I remember the first time I realized how different I was from everyone around me. It was a gathering, one of those family events where everyone pretends to be interested in each other's lives. I was sitting there trying to blend in, but feeling like an outsider. I rented this tiny apartment, which to me felt like a cozy little haven. But to others, it seemed like a temporary stop, a place you left behind as soon as you moved up in the world. Someone, I won't name names, called it cute. "Oh my God, that's so cute. You're still in that little apartment, right?" Like I was some sort of novelty, a rescue dog with a charming attitude. It stung more than I wanted to admit. My mom, she wasn't just supportive of my life choices, she was obsessed with them. Not in a way that made me feel proud, but in a way that made me feel scrutinized. She collected course booklets, reposted motivational quotes on social media, as if my life was some kind of personal project or a cause she was championing. She'd say things like, "Natalie's changing lives," as if we were all part of some grand movement. Natalie was this woman who always seemed to have a microphone in hand, the one everyone listened to. My mom followed her like she was some kind of guru. Whenever I visited, she'd bombard me with questions about how things were going, offering marketing advice like she knew what she was talking about. She'd read testimonials out loud like they were bedtime stories, but never really asked about my work. My actual work, the thing that defined my everyday life. Sometimes she got my job title right, other times she didn't. After a while, I just stopped correcting her. Around 2019, I gave up. It didn't matter anymore. Natalie, she was the same. She'd ask about my life in a half-hearted way, like it was something she was obligated to do. I'd answer, and she'd nod, say something vague like, "Oh, that's good for you," before swiftly changing the subject. It made me feel invisible. There was one person who saw me, who didn't treat me like a placeholder. Sylvia. My great-aunt, or at least that's what I was told. She never felt distant, never felt like someone who was far removed from my life. She was steady, consistent, the kind of person who remembered things about you that you hadn't even said out loud. Her home, it smelled like lemon soap and books that had lived long lives. Sylvia had this cabinet filled with teacups she never used and photo frames with no one in them. She listened more than she talked, which was a rarity in my family. She gave me birthday cards with money inside, asked about the books I was reading, took me for walks. She called me clever, and it felt genuine, not like filler to pass the time. I remember one day in her garden, she leaned down and said, "Maybe this place will be yours one day." I was 7. I didn't understand what she meant, but I liked the way it sounded. When I was 9, she passed away. I don't remember her being sick. One day she was there, and then she wasn't. After the funeral, my parents told me she had debts, that her big house was mostly an illusion, that there was nothing left for me to inherit. They said she lived big, but owed bigger, like it was some kind of wisdom. They repeated it so often that it started to sound rehearsed. I nodded, said nothing, stopped myself from asking if I could still wear the bracelet she gave me. It felt like a betrayal, even though I couldn't explain why. Years later, I found myself holding a folder. There was no dramatic pause, no hesitation. I opened it because I needed to see it, needed something tangible to hold on to. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. "You need to see this." My name was at the top of the documents, dated 19 years ago. It was a trust created by Sylvia, legal, formal, embossed with seals that spoke of importance. The trust was in my name. Sylvia had named Carol and Richard, my parents, or so I believed, as guardians and financial trustees. The terms were clear. They were to disclose everything on my 18th birthday. The assets, whatever they were mine. There was also a letter folded between the pages, tucked as if someone hoped it would survive being ignored. I opened it. It began. "My dearest Mara, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone. And the people who raised you have decided that now is the time for you to finally learn the truth. I pray they've told it all. You deserve to know exactly who you are." The words felt heavy, like they carried years of secrets. Sylvia confessed, "You've always known me as your great-aunt, but in reality, I am your grandmother. Your mother, Celia, was my daughter. She passed away when you were very young, too young to have real memories of her, but not too young to be held in her memory. She explained that after Celia died, Carol and her husband Richard took me in. Carol was Celia's half-sister, Richard, her brother-in-law. They became my guardians, and for that Sylvia was genuinely thankful, but it was her explicit wish that one day I would know the truth. I still remember the day I turned 18. It felt like a turning point, like a moment where everything could change, but I never expected that change would come in the form of a letter. I didn't know what to make of it at first. A trust fund. It sounded so formal, so distant from the life I'd known. Sylvia, the woman who wrote it, said she hoped they had honored her wishes. I felt a strange kind of heaviness reading her words, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She mentioned giving me a foundation, a future of my own, something my mother never had. And then those words hit me. You were not born to them. It was like my whole life shifted slightly, like a puzzle piece had been forcefully realigned. Sitting there, I was just trying to absorb it all, to breathe, to understand. Daniel was next to me, silent, supportive. The lawyer was professional, calm, like this was just another day at the office for him. He explained the next steps in a measured tone, talking about filing for accounting and financial breakdowns. I could barely nod, feeling the weight of the letter in my hands, the truth behind its formal words. A few days later, I imagined the letter landing on their doorstep. It was like a warning shot, a question wrapped in civility. I didn't expect them to call so soon, but at exactly 10 a.m. on the second day, my phone lit up with a familiar name. Mom. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence with indignation. Are you serious? She demanded, skipping past pleasantries, diving straight into anger. You're suing us. Her words were a mix of accusation and betrayal, and I found myself nearly laughing at the familiarity of it all. That was her way, always jumping to conclusions, always making me feel like I was the problem. I tried to keep my voice steady, flat, telling her not to call me that. I didn't want to call her mom anymore, not after everything. I could hear the tension in the background, her pacing, her frustration. She talked about raising me, the costs, the sacrifices they made. But it was like listening to a script, one I'd heard too many times. Then Richard's voice came in, talking about fighting back, about not letting me destroy what they had. It was all so predictable. They were trying to paint themselves as victims, as if money could erase everything they'd done. I hung up, feeling Daniel's eyes on me, understanding without words. In the days that followed, I caught myself slipping, thinking of them as mom and dad, falling back into old habits. It was hard to break away from that, from the years of conditioning, but I knew I had to, for my own sake. 2 days later, they came to my door, no warning, just that familiar knock. When I opened it, they were there, both of them, with those same smiles. It was unsettling, knowing what lay beneath those expressions, the truth I now carried. I wasn't sure what to say, how to react. The confrontation was inevitable, but I still felt unprepared, caught between the past and whatever lay ahead. I remember that day like it was yesterday. Carol and Richard showed up at my door as if everything was perfectly normal, like showing up with a Tupperware container full of cookies could somehow bridge the chasm between us. Carol had always used cookies as a peace offering, like when I was a kid, and she needed me to calm down or when she wanted me to feel better without actually addressing what was wrong. She said they wanted to talk face to face, like a family. Daniel was in the next room, giving me space but ready to step in if needed. I let them in, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I needed to see their faces when they lied to me directly. Carol sat on the couch and immediately started talking, spouting words like misunderstanding, overreaction, dramatic. Richard just stood there, arms crossed, as if daring me to question his authority. Carol said I was blowing things out of proportion, that it wasn't a crime, but just parental choices. I knew those choices were made without my consent, and I wasn't supposed to question them. I didn't bother to respond. She said I was always sensitive, always needed things spelled out for me, implying that I was somehow at fault for their decisions. Maybe if I'd asked more questions as a child, things would be different. She rolled her eyes, dismissing me as if I was being unreasonable. They claimed they didn't want to traumatize me, that I was too fragile back then. Richard finally spoke, saying they gave me a life. I stood there, trying to hold back the anger boiling inside me. I asked about the money, the trust that was supposed to be mine. Carol blinked, caught off guard. I asked if it went to Natalie. Carol's jaw tightened, and I knew I was right. They refused to justify their choices, claiming they used it where it mattered. So it did go to Natalie. Richard's voice was low and final, saying it went to someone who deserved it. That was the breaking point for me. I didn't say anything else. I just opened the door and waited for them to leave. They hesitated, lingering as if expecting me to back down. Carol's parting words were a knife to the heart. "You're not our daughter anymore. Hope you're happy." She left the cookies on the table as if they were some kind of consolation prize. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at those cookies and wrote a message to my lawyer. I instructed him to proceed with the lawsuit and to include Natalie. Daniel didn't ask what happened. He just poured me a cup of tea and sat down across from me, offering silent support. They tried to buy me off with a deal, $150,000 wired directly to me if I dropped the case and let everything go. Their words, not mine. The email was cold and impersonal. No greeting, no apology, just numbers, and the softest legal threat one could convey in 12-point font. Daniel read it first and pushed the laptop toward me like it was a venomous snake. The message claimed it was more than enough, that I hadn't earned it anyway. I kept rereading a line at the end. "You were never the ambitious one, cute." I didn't dignify it with a response. 2 days later, Natalie's face appeared on my screen. It was one of those women to watch videos, perfectly curated with filtered lighting and a tasteful bookshelf in the background. She was being interviewed in what looked like an office, or more accurately, a room designed to look like an office rather than a shrine to her own ego. She claimed no one gave her anything, that she built her business with grit, failure, and persistence. I watched in silence as she smiled, seemingly believing her own narrative. She said, "If you want something, you have to earn it." I closed the tab, my resolve hardening. I called my lawyer and told him we were going all the way. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Natalie. I didn't answer. She called again, and by the third call, I picked up. She didn't bother with pleasantries, just launched into a tirade as if she'd been rehearsing. She accused me of dragging her name through the dirt, called me obsessed, said I always had been. She said I didn't have the right to ruin her career just because I couldn't build one for myself. I asked her to talk to Mom and Dad about where the money came from. Silence followed, and then, reluctantly, she admitted she found out. The scholarship had paid for school, but it was a competitive program, and she claimed she earned her place. The grants helped launch her business, but she insisted her ideas were hers alone. It was just money, she said. It didn't define her success. I didn't argue. I let her finish and hang up. The court date approached quickly, much faster than I anticipated. I remember sitting in that courtroom, feeling like an outsider in my own life, watching as everything unfolded before me. I didn't attend every hearing, just the one that truly mattered. The judge was a stern woman, her hair silver, her expression unyielding. She had no room for emotions, just the facts. My lawyer, calm and precise, presented the trust records, bank statements, and all those transactions. It was all laid bare. The shell accounts, the payments labeled as a scholarship fund that funneled straight into Natalie's tuition. Everything we'd marked as marketing budgets were misused, documented as business grants, but directly tied to my name. There it all was, a paper trail that didn't lie. Natalie's lawyer tried to play the sympathy card, painting her as just a kid who didn't understand. But the records showed she knew, had known for years, and remained silent. She'd even have the nerve to claim no one ever gave her anything, despite benefiting directly from my trust. The court's decision was clear-cut. The business was to be liquidated, and the remaining assets would come to me. Carol and Richard sat there in silence as the judgment was passed. Carol's hands were still in her lap, while Richard just stared ahead, like he was watching a disaster unfold that he couldn't stop. 2 weeks later, the transfer came through. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to start anew, to breathe without the constant weight of wondering what had been taken from me. The rest of the story came in whispers, quiet rumors, messages from names I hadn't come across in years. There was a short article hidden away on page 6 of the local newspaper, mentioning the private decision to shut down the business. No comments, no corrections, just silence. They sold their house too. It wasn't made public, but word got around. People who were once seen as pillars of the community suddenly downsizing to a modest rental 2 towns away made waves. Natalie moved back in with them. They say she's recalibrating, which is ironic, considering that's what she named her $39 online course for people who'd just been dumped or fired. Then there was one last message, an email from Carol. No subject line, just a single sentence. "You've destroyed everything. You were never one of us." I deleted it before Daniel could see. There are nights when I can't sleep, and in those moments, I take out Sylvia's letter. It's worn now, with one corner faded and soft, but I still read it as if it might reveal something new. Not because I'm seeking closure, but because it's the only thing in all of this that was truly intended for me. I haven't shared my next steps with anyone. I don't feel the need to. Honestly, I'm not ready to build anything right now. I just want to pause, to feel like the ground beneath my feet is truly mine. I never imagined I'd find this sense of peace, not after the hearings, not after turning old family photographs into legal evidence. But here I am. Carol and Richard haven't reached out since the ruling. Natalie has been silent too. And I'm okay with that. The peace I feel now speaks louder than their silence ever could. We've moved to a smaller house, but it has bigger windows. Daniel cooks more often now, and I find myself laughing more. I've gained everything: the business, the accounts, the emergency fund that was supposedly never meant for me, even the $150,000 they once offered just to make me disappear. I took it all. I thought I might feel shame, but I don't. They spent years deceiving me, and that money was rightfully mine. Now it is. What will I do with it? I'm not sure yet. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll finally sleep without grinding my teeth at night. I met with Mary Sol, one of Celia's old friends. We had coffee, and she brought pictures, told me how Celia had been wild, full of creativity, and absolutely in love with me. That's all I needed to hear. There's nothing left unfinished. What was mine is finally in my hands, and I'm fully standing in it now. Did I go too far? Or maybe not far enough? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.